Billionaire CEO's daughter wouldn't speak to anyone until the black waitress sat beside her. Why wouldn't she speak to anyone? And what could happen when the black waitress chose to sit beside her? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our channel. We're so glad to have you here for another powerful and emotional story. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you so much for being here, watching, and supporting our channel. Your support truly means a lot to us. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What do you think might happen when someone who refuses to speak to anyone finally meets the black waitress? With that question in mind, let's begin the story and discover what happens next. The crystal shattered before Sophie's tiny hands disappeared beneath the banquet table. Champagne sprayed across the white linen, cold droplets catching the gold light as 200 heads turned toward the sound. Camera shutters clicked from behind the velvet press line. Sharp, mechanical bursts cutting through the low jazz and polished laughter. Sophie flinched at every flash. Then she dropped to her knees, clutched a worn blue notebook against her chest, and crawled beneath the tablecloth. Sophie. Ethan Cole's voice carried farther than he intended. He stood near a black marble stage, one hand still resting beside a contract worth $600 million. Across from him, 3 investors waited beneath the projected logos of Cole Meridian and its newest acquisition. A fountain pen lay uncapped beside the signature line. The room smelled of citrus cologne, seared steak, and spilled champagne. Another photographer leaned sideways for a clearer angle beneath the table. His flash fired. Sophie struck the underside of the tabletop with both palms. Silverware jumped. A water glass tipped, rolled through a puddle, and stopped against Ethan's leather shoe. He did not look down. He looked at the investors. "Please continue," he told the lead attorney, smoothing one cuff beneath his tuxedo sleeve. But the attorney's page had already stopped turning. Phones were rising around the ballroom. A 6-year-old hiding under a table was becoming more valuable than the agreement on stage. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Get her out of here," he said to the nearest staff member. "Quietly, before this damages the deal." Nia Brooks heard him from behind a service station 10 feet away. She had been gathering broken crystal with a folded bar towel, its rough cotton already wet against her palm. The banquet manager gestured towards Sophie with 2 impatient fingers, but Nia did not move. She watched the child instead. Sophie was not kicking at anyone. She was not throwing food or demanding attention. Her shoulders climbed toward her ears whenever a shutter snapped. Her fingers dug into the notebook's cloth cover whenever white light leaked beneath the tablecloth. Click. Sophie squeezed her eyes shut. Click, click. Her breathing shortened. Click. She pressed one hand over her ear and the other against the carpet, as if trying to hold the floor still. Nia's gaze shifted to a teaspoon near the fallen glass. Its polished surface caught a photographer's flash and sent a thin blade of light beneath the table. Sophie recoiled from the reflection before anyone touched her. That was when Nia understood. This was not defiance. It was terror with nowhere to go. "Ms. Brooks." The banquet manager's whisper came through clenched teeth. "Remove the child." Nia set the broken crystal into a metal tray. The pieces chimed against one another, and Sophie jerked again. Nia immediately covered them with the towel, muting the sound. Then she crossed to the press line and lowered one camera with an open palm. No more flashes near the table. The photographer stared at her black uniform and brass name tag. "I'm credentialed." "She's 6. Ethan finally turned. His expression warned Nia that every second carried a price. Behind him, an investor closed the contract folder. Beneath the table, Sophie's shoes scraped backward until they struck a chair leg. 2 security officers approached from opposite sides, their earpieces gleaming under the chandeliers. Nia saw their hands reaching for the tablecloth. She also saw the empty patch of carpet beside Sophie, close enough to be noticed, far enough not to trap her. Nia removed her serving tray and placed it on the floor. Then, while the ballroom waited for someone to drag the billionaire's daughter away, the waitress lowered herself toward the only seat Sophie had left open. The white tablecloth lifted half an inch as 2 gloved hands reached for its edge. Ice clicked inside abandoned champagne flutes, and the chandeliers cast hard diamonds across the carpet. Nia settled into the empty space before security could expose the child beneath the table. Not close enough to corner her. Not far enough to leave her alone. The carpet scratched through Nia's thin black slacks, and cold air from a floor vent brushed her wrists. She placed both hands on her knees, palms visible, then looked away from Sophie. No questions. No soothing promises. No demand for eye contact. Above them, the ballroom held its breath around a $600 million agreement. The lead attorney remained beside the presentation screen, one hand frozen over the remote. Ethan stood near the unsigned contract, his jaw locked as investors watched his daughter's hiding place become the center of the room. Ms. Brooks, the banquet manager said, each syllable clipped. Move. Now. Nia did not answer. Arguing would turn the space beneath the table into another stage, and Sophie had already endured too many eyes. Instead, Nia reached slowly toward the service pocket at her hip. Sophie's blue shoes jerked back. Nia stopped at once. A second passed, then another. Only when the shoes became still did she draw out a fresh linen napkin. The fabric whispered between her fingers. One corner folded inward, then the other. A narrow crease became a wing. Another became a tail. The security officers exchanged a glance, but neither moved while Ethan watched. Nia worked without looking beneath the table, letting Sophie hear each soft press of cloth against cloth. The shape was imperfect, a small white bird with uneven wings, but it could stand. Nia placed it on the carpet exactly halfway between them and withdrew her hand. It doesn't need anything from you, she said quietly. The words barely carried beyond the tablecloth. It can just sit here. Sophie's breathing remained quick, but the scraping of her shoes stopped. Her fingers appeared first, curled around the worn blue notebook pressed to her chest. Then one eye emerged from behind her forearm. She studied the bird. Nia kept her face turned toward the ballroom, giving the child the privacy to choose. Ethan took one step forward. Sophie vanished an inch deeper into shadow. He stopped. For once, the man who could silence executives with a glance had no order that could help. The photographer shifted behind the press line. A camera strap creaked, but the lens stayed lowered. Under the table, Sophie released one hand from her notebook. Her fingertips touched the bird's crooked wing. The linen tipped, recovered, and stood again. Nia finally turned her head, not fully, only enough to offer the side of her face. Warm light spilled beneath the table and caught the brass letters on her name tag. Sophie read them. Her gaze traveled upward. For the first time in months, according to every specialist Ethan had hired and every report locked in his office, Sophie Cole chose to look directly at someone she did not know. Not past Nia, not through her, at her. The room above them disappeared from that narrow exchange. Sophie's gray eyes held Nia's for 1 second, then 2. Nia did not smile too quickly. She simply breathed at the child's pace. Sophie nudged the linen bird across the carpet until it touched Nia's knee. A choice. An invitation. The banquet manager's polished shoes entered the gap beside them. Enough, he said, reaching for Nia's shoulder. Sophie's hand closed around the bird, and her eyes stayed fixed on Nia as if waiting to see whether the first person she had chosen would now be taken away. Take your hand off her. The words cut through the soft jazz before the banquet manager's fingers reached Nia's shoulder. A security chief in a charcoal suit stepped into the narrow opening, his earpiece glowing beneath the ballroom's amber light. Behind him, silverware clicked against china, and the presentation screen continued casting the unsigned $600 million agreement across the wall. Mr. Cole gave an order, he said. The child has to come out. Nia shifted onto one knee, blocking the space beneath the table without touching Sophie. The carpet scratched through her stockings. Cold air from a floor vent pressed against her wrist. Then let her come out when she chooses. The banquet manager stared at the brass name tag on her uniform. Move, Nia. Now. No one syllable. No apology wrapped around it. The security chief crouched and extended a hand toward Sophie. Her shoulders snapped upward. The linen bird collapsed inside her fist, and one patent leather shoe scraped backward across the carpet. Nia raised her palm between them. If you pull her, You'll make this worse. You're a banquet server, the manager whispered. Not a specialist. And she's a little girl. Not a problem to remove. Ethan stood several feet away, framed by the blue glare of the presentation screen. His fountain pen remained uncapped beside the contract. The lead attorney watched him, then checked the ballroom clock. Every delayed second had a price. Nia knew hers now. The manager's hand tightened around his radio. Stand up, or your shift ends here. Nia looked beneath the table. Sophie's gray eyes had dropped to the crushed bird. Her breath came in thin, uneven pulls. Nia removed an order pad from her apron and placed it on the carpet. With a black pen, she drew a simple table. For legs, a white cloth, and a small circle underneath it. Then she drew a second circle beside the first. No labels. No questions. She slid the pad halfway toward Sophie and set the pen beside it. The security chief lowered his hand, but only by an inch. Sophie studied the two circles. Her fingertips loosened around the linen. After several seconds, she took the pen and drew a dark line between them. Nia nodded once. Above the table, the photographer adjusted his grip. A plastic dial clicked beneath his thumb. Sophie flinched. Nia placed 2 fingers against the carpet and tapped softly. Tap, tap. She waited. The ballroom's ventilation hummed. Melted candle wax carried a faint vanilla scent through the chilled air. Tap, tap. Nia repeated the rhythm, slower this time, giving Sophie room to refuse it. The child pressed 1 finger to the blue notebook against her chest. Then she reached down. Tap, tap, tap. 3 beats answered from beneath the table. Not an echo. A correction. Nia tapped twice again. Sophie answered with 3 firm beats, her gaze moving from the drawing to Nia's face. Ethan heard them. His eyes left the contract. The lead attorney stopped checking the clock. Even the security chief withdrew his hand completely. Sophie touched the circle Nia had drawn for her, then pointed to the second circle. At Nia. Tap, tap, tap. The banquet manager lifted his radio. Last warning. Leave the VIP area, or you're terminated. Nia remained on the floor. Sophie opened her worn blue notebook for the first time that night and held it tightly between them. The linen bird rested on the page. Then the child turned toward her father and tapped 3 times against the cover. Ethan took 1 step closer. Sophie's hand froze over the notebook as the room waited to learn whether he would answer her signal or order the only person she had chosen to leave. The linen bird slid from the notebook and landed beside Ethan's polished shoe. Air conditioning whispered through the ballroom, carrying the scent of white roses and spilled champagne, while the presentation screen washed every face in cold blue light. Sophie waited beneath the table with 1 finger raised over the notebook. 3 taps unanswered. Ethan looked from his daughter to Nia, then toward the unsigned agreement. Ms. Brooks, leave the VIP area. Nia's palm remained flat against the carpet. She asked you to come closer. I heard her. His voice stayed low, shaped for boardrooms and microphones. Now step away. The banquet manager released a breath and pointed toward the service doors. Nia rose slowly, making no sudden movement. Don't pull her out. Keep the cameras quiet. Let her decide when to move. You've done enough, Ethan said. This time, the words carried the weight of an order. Nia stepped beyond the velvet rope. The space beside Sophie became empty. A tiny metallic click came from the photographer's lowered camera as his thumb brushed an equipment dial. Sophie jerked. Her shoulder struck the underside of the table with a hollow thud. Silverware trembled above her. The notebook snapped shut against her chest. Sophie. Ethan moved forward, but the child crawled backward until her shoes tangled in the tablecloth. Plates shifted. A water goblet tipped, rolled along the white linen, and struck the carpet. Her breathing came in dry, scraping bursts. She pressed both hands over her ears, trapping the blue notebook beneath one elbow. Nia stopped at the rope. She did not cross it. Lower the screen, she called. Turn off the presentation. The lead attorney glanced at Ethan. Ethan hesitated only a second, then lifted his hand. The screen went black. The room dimmed, but Sophie's panic did not. Her heel kicked the table leg. The notebook slipped free, skidded across the carpet, and opened at Ethan's feet. A page covered in dark crayon faced upward. A black car. White rain slashing across a windshield. A woman drawn behind the wheel, one hand lifted toward a glowing phone. Beside the phone, a man's face filled a red square, his mouth rendered as a jagged line. The next page showed the same woman beneath a burst of camera flashes outside the hotel. Another showed Sophie crouched behind a bedroom door, while two adult figures stood apart, sharp words drawn between them like broken glass. At the bottom, in uneven block letters, Sophie had written, "MOM left crying." Dad was loud. Then MOM didn't come home. The ballroom no longer sounded expensive. No jazz. No murmured negotiations. Only Sophie's breath and the faint hum of the cooling system. Ethan bent, but his hand stopped inches above the paper. The color drained from his knuckles as he recognized the dress, the phone call, and the last argument his wife had carried into the rain on the night she died. Sophie saw him looking. She lunged from beneath the table, seized the notebook, and curled around it. Not from defiance. From the terror of having exposed the memory she had been guarding alone. Nia gripped the velvet rope. "Mr. Cole, don't ask her to explain it." Ethan's eyes stayed on the red crayon mouth that had been drawn as his own. Behind him, the lead attorney quietly closed the contract folder. Sophie raised her face at last, tears caught in her lashes, and pointed first to the empty place where Nia had been sitting, then to the carpet beside her. Ethan had ordered Nia away. Now his daughter was asking him to take her place. The air conditioning whispered above the ballroom, while the contract clock glowed 8:47 p.m. on the presentation screen. Beyond the velvet rope, Nia held one palm low, signaling Ethan not to reach for Sophie. "Give her the choice," she said. Ethan's phone vibrated against the marble table. The lead attorney leaned close enough that only he could hear. "The partners leave in 6 minutes. If they walk, the $600 million agreement goes with them." Sophie remained curled around her blue notebook, one finger still aimed at the carpet. Crystal chandeliers cast hard white light across Ethan's cuff links as he looked from the waiting signatures to the empty place beside his daughter. For years, rooms had moved when he spoke. Employees stood. Lawyers obeyed. Markets reacted. But the 6-year-old beneath the table did not need another command. Ethan removed his suit jacket and laid it over the back of a chair. Then he lowered himself onto the carpet. A murmur passed through the investors. His tailored trousers pressed against the rough fibers, and the chill from the ballroom floor climbed through the fabric. He did not crawl closer. He did not ask Sophie to come out. He sat exactly where she had pointed, leaving several feet of open space between them. "Lower the presentation," he told the lead attorney. The glowing valuation charts vanished. Blue-white light drained from the room, leaving only the warm chandeliers and the muted gold of the wall sconces. "Mr. Cole," one partner said, "we need your decision." Ethan kept his hands open on his knees. "You have it. The signing is postponed." Chairs shifted sharply. A pen struck the tabletop. Somewhere near the service doors, the banquet manager exhaled through his teeth. Ethan's phone buzzed again, but he turned it face down. "What now?" he asked Nia. Not as an employer. Not as the man whose name crowned 43 floors in Manhattan. As a father who had finally admitted he did not know. Nia remained outside the rope, honoring the boundary he had forced upon her. "Don't fill the silence," she said. "Let Sophie decide what happens next." Ethan nodded once. Then he waited. The room smelled of cooling coffee, furniture polish, and the gardenias arranged along the signing table. No one spoke. Sophie's breathing came in uneven pulls. Ethan matched its pace without moving toward her. In, pause, out, until the harsh rhythm softened. After several seconds, Sophie uncovered the blue notebook. Ethan's hand lifted by instinct. Nia's fingers closed gently into a fist. "Stop." He lowered it. Sophie studied him, then placed the notebook on the carpet between them. She did not surrender it. She kept 2 fingers on the cover and tapped 3 times. Ethan glanced toward Nia. She gave no answer for him, so he tapped 3 times against the floor. Sophie's shoulders loosened. She slid the linen bird from the notebook and set it closer to him, but when Ethan reached, she pulled it back. The old impatience tightened his jaw. He swallowed it. May I? He asked. Sophie considered the question. Then she pushed the bird across the carpet. Ethan lifted it as carefully as if it were made of glass. The lead attorney closed the contract folder. The deadline passed in silence. For the first time that evening, Sophie, not Cole Meridian, not the partners, not Ethan, controlled what came next. She turned to a clean page, gripped a blue crayon, and began to write. Before the first word was finished, Nia saw the shape of the letters and went still. Mr. Cole, she said from beyond the velvet robe, her voice barely carrying over the cooling system. Before she shows you that page, there's something about that night you need to hear from me. The blue crayon stopped with a faint scrape against the paper. Cold light from the darkened presentation screen washed across the carpet, while untouched coffee cooled on the signing table and filled the air with a bitter smell. Nia stepped through the velvet rope before anyone could order her back. I was here that night, she said. Ethan's fingers tightened around the linen bird. Sophie lowered her crayon, but kept one hand pressed over the unfinished sentence. What night? Ethan asked, though the answer was already gathering in his face. Nia glanced at Sophie, then crouched several feet away, keeping her voice low. The night her mother died. I was working a private dinner in the East Ballroom. Your wife stood near the service corridor with her phone against her ear. A ventilation fan hummed above them. Somewhere behind the closed kitchen doors, silverware struck a tray. I heard you shouting through the phone, Nia continued. You told her the photographers were waiting. You said she was embarrassing you by leaving. She asked you to stop arguing because Sophie was in the car. Ethan looked down at the bird. One folded wing had collapsed beneath his thumb. I told her to come back, he whispered. Yes. Nia did not soften the word. And she said the rain was getting worse. Then the call ended. The lead attorney moved towards Sophie's notebook. That account may create legal exposure. We need the notebook secured before anyone photographs its contents. Sophie pulled it against her chest. Her shoe tapped once against the carpet, sharp and uneven. Nia shifted between the attorney and the child. This time, she was not shielding Sophie from hands. She was shielding her from becoming evidence before anyone treated her as a daughter. No, the attorney stopped. Ms. Brooks, that notebook may contain material relevant to the company and Mr. Cole personally. It belongs to Sophie. You are interfering with counsel. I'm refusing to help turn a 6-year-old's grief into a press strategy. Near the service doors, the banquet manager straightened his jacket. His face had gone pale beneath the chandelier's gold reflection. Nia, step away and surrender the notebook. I don't have it. Her eyes remained on Sophie. And I won't ask her to give it to you. Then you're terminated, effective immediately. The words landed without volume. No shouting. No spectacle. Just the soft buzz of recessed lights and the hiss of chilled air across linen tablecloths. Nia removed her brass name tag. The pin caught briefly in the black fabric of her uniform before coming free. She placed it on the carpet outside the velvet rope, beside a silver serving tray. Ethan rose halfway. You can't fire her for protecting my daughter. Mr. Cole, the manager said. She disclosed private information from a guest conversation and defied direct instructions. Nia lifted one palm toward Ethan. Don't rescue me by making this disappear. Then she looked at Sophie. Let her decide what happens to her words. Sophie's grip slowly loosened. She set the blue notebook on her knees, turned it away from the attorney, and angled the page only toward her father. Ethan sank back onto the carpet. The linen bird rested between his open hands. Nia had answered what she knew about that rainy night, and the price was now lying on the floor in the shape of a discarded name tag. But Sophie's crayon moved again. One letter, then another. Ethan watched the sentence take form, while no one in the ballroom dared reach for it. Warm light from the chandeliers trembled across the blue notebook, while the ballroom's air conditioning whispered over abandoned champagne glasses. Somewhere behind the velvet rope, ice settled inside a silver pitcher with a muted crack. Sophie covered the sentence with her small palm. Her crayon-stained fingers pressed into the paper as the lead attorney shifted one polished shoe toward her. The notebook snapped shut, not from panic, from choice. Step back, Ethan said. His voice was low now, stripped of the authority that once made rooms obey. The attorney stopped. Sophie studied her father, then glanced toward Nia. Her discarded name tag lay near the silver tray, its bent pin catching the light. Nia did not approach. She did not interpret the child's movement or ask her to continue. She simply folded her hands against her black banquet apron and waited. Sophie opened the notebook again. Slowly, deliberately. She turned it so only Ethan could see. The page held one sentence in uneven blue letters. Some leaned too far forward. Others had been traced twice, as if 6-year-old hands needed courage to make them permanent. Ethan read the words. I stay quiet because every time I speak, you remember Mom. The linen bird collapsed between his fingers. A sharp breath slipped from him, but Sophie did not look away. For months, doctors had called her silence withdrawal. Consultants had described it as a crisis requiring privacy. Ethan had treated it like another problem that could be contained by schedules, specialists, and locked doors. But there was no accusation on the page. No punishment. Sophie had been protecting him. Every unspoken word had been a 6-year-old child standing guard over a grown man's guilt. Ethan lowered the bird before his grip could crush it. You thought talking would hurt me? Sophie touched one finger to the word Mom. Then she pointed at him. Her hand moved to her own throat, and she closed her fist. The photographer's equipment dial clicked softly as he locked it and kept the camera lowered. Sophie flinched, but this time she did not crawl beneath the table. She reached toward Nia instead. Nia remained beyond the rope, honoring the distance Sophie had chosen. Your words belong to you, she said. You decide when they leave that page. Sophie looked back at Ethan. Then she tore the sheet from the notebook. The sound was small, dry, final. The lead attorney raised a hand. Mr. Cole, that document could expose. Ethan lifted his palm without turning. The attorney fell silent. Sophie folded the page once and placed it inside Ethan's open hands with the linen bird. Then she tapped the carpet 3 times. Ethan stared at the folded message. His first response caught behind his teeth. The polished apology, the promise to fix everything. The language of a man accustomed to controlling consequences. Sophie waited. So did Nia. At last, Ethan answered with 3 taps of his own. Sophie's shoulders lowered by half an inch. You never had to protect me from loving her, he whispered. And you never had to disappear to keep me standing. Sophie raised her crayon again. Beneath the torn edge left in the notebook, she wrote 2 new words and angled them toward him. Sit here. Ethan moved closer only after she nudged the linen bird toward the space between them. Across the ballroom, the presentation screen suddenly brightened. Cole Meridian's logo flooded the walls in cold white light, and the lead attorney's phone vibrated against the signing table. He checked the message, then faced Ethan. The board is on the line. They want Sophie removed, and they want your signature now. Sophie heard every word. She pulled her notebook against her chest, but her eyes stayed on her father. This time, she was not hiding his guilt from him. She was waiting to see what he would do with it. The lead attorney pressed the speaker button, and the board chairman's voice cut through the ballroom with the chill of steel. Remove the child. Complete the signing. The air conditioning whispered above rows of untouched crystal glasses. Cold light from the presentation screen washed the carpet white, flattening every face beneath Cole Meridian's towering logo. Ethan looked at Sophie. Her fingers tightened around the blue notebook, but she did not retreat beneath the table. She stayed beside the empty place she had chosen for him, watching. The attorney lowered his voice. $600 million. Hundreds of jobs. The board needs you to separate a private matter from your duty. My daughter is not a private matter. Ethan rose slowly, carrying the torn page and the linen bird. Sophie's 3 words faced outward in purple crayon. Sit here. Behind the velvet rope, Nia stood without her name tag, one hand resting against the rough seam of her uniform pocket. The banquet manager had already moved her serving tray aside, as though she no longer belonged in the room. Ethan walked past the signing chair, past the waiting fountain pen, past the contract whose final page bore a blank line beneath his name. The leather folder made a soft, expensive creak when he closed it. Cancel the signing. A chair scraped sharply across the marble. The chairman's voice hardened through the speaker. If you walk away now, the board will review your authority before morning. Ethan turned toward the credentialed cameras. The photographer kept his equipment lowered. After a soft click from the dial, he locked it beneath his thumb. Sophie flinched at the sound, then steadied when Ethan answered with 3 quiet taps against the closed contract. Tap, tap, tap. Leave the cameras where they are, Ethan said. I have spent years controlling what people saw. Tonight, that stops. The lead attorney stepped forward. Any statement connecting the accident, the child, or Ms. Brooks to company decisions could create serious exposure. Then write this down accurately. Ethan faced the room, no podium between him and the cold glare of the screen. I treated my daughter's grief as a threat to manage. I protected a corporate image while she learned to make herself smaller for me. That failure belongs to me, not to Sophie, not to Nia Brooks. Murmurs moved through the ballroom like wind through dry paper. Phone screens brightened. The Cole Meridian logo still filled the walls, but now it looked less like a crown than a witness. Ethan pointed toward the banquet manager. Ms. Brooks was terminated for refusing to surrender a 6-year-old's private notebook and for refusing to turn that child's pain into legal strategy. Her termination is rescinded, effective immediately. Full back pay. No disciplinary record. Nia's gaze did not soften. Not if it comes with silence. It doesn't. Ethan turned to the attorney. No non-disclosure agreement. No statement drafted for her. No condition of any kind. If she returns, it will be because she chooses to. The banquet manager opened his mouth, then closed it when Ethan slid the unsigned contract away from the fountain pen. On the speaker, another board member demanded an emergency vote. Ethan disconnected the call. The vast room fell quiet except for the ventilation and the faint rustle of Sophie opening her notebook. He had surrendered the deal, the board's protection, and perhaps control of the company that carried his name. Yet he did not look toward the screen. He looked toward his daughter. Sophie studied Nia beyond the velvet rope, then placed the linen bird on the carpet beside her. With one finger, she pointed first to Nia, then to the empty place. The room waited to learn whether restored employment could repair what dismissal had exposed, and whether Nia would choose to sit down again. A soft click broke the silence. Sophie flinched, and the photographer immediately lowered the camera, locked its equipment dial, and set it face down against his jacket. No flash followed. No shutter chased her. Beneath the ballroom's amber chandeliers, the linen bird rested beside an empty patch of carpet, its folded wings glowing against the dark blue weave. Nia stood beyond the velvet rope with her name tag in one hand, the pin pressed into her palm. The room smelled of cooling coffee, white roses, and the faint metallic heat of stage lights. I heard what you offered, she said to Ethan. But a job returned by a billionaire can still feel like an order. Ethan did not approach her. He did not summon the banquet manager. He moved one step backward and left the choice where it belonged. Then don't return for me. Nia looked at Sophie. The little girl tapped the carpet once. Not the old 3-beat signal asking to be understood. One clear invitation. Nia unclipped the velvet rope herself. The brass hook made a small, clean sound. She crossed the boundary no manager had permitted her to cross before, then stopped beside the child. May I? Sophie slid the linen bird closer to the empty place. Nia sat, not as an employee obeying a guest, not as a woman accepting rescue. She sat because Sophie had asked, and because this time the entire room understood that the smallest person in it had set the terms. The carpet was rough beneath Nia's knees. Cold air drifted from the ceiling vents, lifting one corner of the unsigned $600 million agreement on the table. The deadline clock reached 0. The screen dimmed. No signature appeared. Ethan's company had lost its deal, but Sophie no longer had to lose herself to preserve it. She opened her blue notebook and turned to a clean page. Her pencil moved slowly, producing a dry whisper against the paper. The security chief remained by the rope without touching it. The lead attorney closed his leather folder. Across the room, the banquet manager removed Nia's termination form from his clipboard, tore it through the disciplinary stamp, and placed both halves in his pocket. Your record will be clean, he said. Nia kept her eyes on Sophie. My record was never the part that needed cleaning. The manager lowered his gaze. Ethan came down to the carpet, but he did not take the space beside his daughter. He waited several feet away until Sophie pointed to a place across from her. Only then did he sit, his tailored trousers folding against the floor while board notifications flashed unanswered on his phone. Sophie drew 3 figures. One small, one in an apron, one without a briefcase. Then she wrote beneath them, pressing hard enough to leave grooves in the page. "Can Nia stay because I asked?" Ethan's throat moved. "Yes." Nia turned her name tag over in her hand. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said. "If the hotel agrees that frightened children are not disruptions, and staff may protect them without being punished." The banquet manager nodded before Ethan could speak. "Agreed." Nia set the name tag on the carpet instead of pinning it on. Tomorrow would be work. Tonight was trust. Sophie reached for the linen bird, unfolded one wing, and wrote a single word inside it. Then, for the first time anyone in that ballroom had heard her voice in months, she looked directly at Nia and whispered, "Stay." The word was thin and unsteady, almost lost beneath the ventilation. Yet Ethan did not collapse under the memory it carried. He placed his phone face down. Nia remained beside Sophie. And in a room built to obey the richest man, the bravest voice belonged to the child who finally knew she did not have to be silent to keep her father standing.